So we are here today with Sandy Williams, teacher here in the Atlanta area. And what are you trying this year, Sandy, to kind of get your kids interested in language arts?
Well, I have developed an educational program. I call it Teaching Literature Supernaturally, TLS for short. And it uses episodic television to teach the concepts of literature. And the television show that I'm using in this particular evolution, I guess you could say, is the television show Supernatural, which is also therefore what kind of influenced the title.
Right. So what made you choose Supernatural?
I hadn't been following the show. I knew it was there, but I hadn't really seen it. Summer of 2010, I was house sitting. TNT was showing the reruns, and so I would be stuck in this house because it was so hot during the day, so the dogs had to stay inside, and we were watching TV. And I ended up, the first episode that I saw was Mystery Spot.
I love that episode.
And I mean, like I said, I was aware of the show, but I hadn't really thought a lot about it.
Right, Supernatural's version of Groundhog Day.
Which is one of my favorite movies. But I thought it was kind of interesting, and so I started watching it on TNT. And I guess I watched it for a couple of weeks. And then I was sort of interested, and I started school that year, and we had a new teacher at our school that year, drama teacher, and I mentioned it to her, and she showed me the DVDs. Mm-hmm. And I watched all 5 seasons in about less than a month. And I was just really taken, especially in the first 2 seasons, with the literary quality of the show.
Right.
I could see such literary references, the allusions, the complexity, but I was also really taken with the way that the story was not only told by the script and the plot, but the camera angles and the music and the facial expressions. There was so much nuance, the kind of things that I would really expect a student to be looking at when they're reading, looking at all those little details and careful things. And as I was watching, I kept thinking, oh, this is like this poem or this story, and so I could connect all these different pieces of literature. And this was an idea that I'd been playing with for a while, and in the process of watching Supernatural and becoming a fan of the show, I was like, this is it. This is the show to prove that I can do this.
Right.
And so that winter, I started working on the plans, and essentially it ends up being a glorified lesson plan, but it's a book. And so now I'm trying it. It's the kind of thing that I would hope that you could try with other series, but I would have to say Supernatural, in terms of what's out there right now, is the single best example to use.
So what made you decide to start it this year with your students?
The final straw, actually, that caused me to go ahead and just do this and write it out was, so I would become a fan of the show, and I'm starting to play with ideas, and my friend Jada, like I said, she's infectious, and so
this is the drama teacher.
The drama teacher, and so my kids were all watching the show too at home, and in this drama group, and I overheard 2 of my former students from English, but her 2 students in her drama class, talking about the fact that Jared Padalecki's mother was an English teacher.
And Jared's one of the 2 stars of Supernatural.
And wasn't that so cool? Because I was an English teacher, and they thought that was really cool, and so if his mom was an English teacher, he had to be cool, and I don't know, it was just sort of this, blinding flash in the back of my head, and I thought, I'd really love to explain my idea to Mrs. Padalecki and explain to her what I was thinking, because I had this idea, and I was like, if it's great if I can do it, but if I can't share it with other people, what does that
if it's not
accomplish?
Reproducible.
Exactly. So we have this term in education, we call it an essential question, when what the focus of a lesson is. And so my essential question became, how do I explain this to Mrs. Padalecki? And so I wrote this book, which became the whole plan of how to explain it to her. And then, of course, once I had it completely written, I went to my school and said, "You got to let me try this."
Right.
And even then, also, I've been talking to other teachers, and I have a website, and I presented at a national conference this summer, and hope to present at more conferences, because if you believe in something, you want to share it with as many people as possible. And I would have to say, watching my students this semester so far, it's amazing to watch the way the kids learn with this.
So how is it different from before? Like, how are the kids interacting differently with the lessons?
In language arts, I think there's a lot of disconnect in terms of, why do we have to take this class? I want so much for my students to see literature in everything, to understand why it is that we study this stuff. And usually in a regular language arts class at the high school level, we do some grammar exercises. We'll read a story and then we'll say, okay, let's talk about it. But the thing is, half the kids come to class and they haven't read it. They don't know why they had to read it, or they skim it enough that they can answer the content questions. They listen to what you say, they ask for the study guide, they pass the test, but it doesn't touch them. Nothing reaches them. They don't see the point of why they do this. I was reading a study that said that 1 in 3 kids, less than 1 in 3 kids, read for fun anymore. They don't see the point. Whereas in this kind of lesson, in this kind of method, I'm showing them that literature is not necessarily just text, but by showing them that literature exists in other forms, like television, good television, mind you. When they see that it exists in other forms, they can start connecting it to the text literature, and all of this stuff comes together and becomes so much more relevant to them. And then they're using all of it together. So many, one of the things that I hear from my students all the time is they're going, wow, there really isn't a difference between a short story and an episode of a television show that I like. I'm like, no, there isn't. You use the same skills to interpret the different meanings and the details and the ideas that you do when you're reading. It's just a matter of figuring out what it means and paying attention. We do so many things mindlessly, and we're not giving the kids the opportunity. I mean, they don't see the point of reading. But then the other thing too is so many of them watch TV or movies, and they, you know, there's a little bit of drool and the glassy eyes, and they're not paying any attention because they're just being entertained. But once I get them to turn their brain on and see
you can't shut it
all
off.
those details, and then you transfer that over to the writing, and it's like watching these kids and they're going, wow, there's this whole world here.
So have you seen a difference with your students this year?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit daunting because, first of all, the kids absolutely are in love with the series. And that's been really awesome because these kids are all 15-year-olds.
Right.
In 2005, they were too young to be watching this show.
Right.
But now, so therefore they didn't get into it, but they're all going to be watching the season premiere on Friday.
Yeah.
I have a solemn promise from them that they will not watch anything from season 1 or season 2 without me, because we're doing that. I don't want them to spoil each other.
Right, so you're only using the first 2 seasons.
Yes.
In your lessons.
And I have, between my 2 classes, I have 50 kids. None of them had watched the series up until this point, and I know that several of them have already gone and bought other seasons, and they're talking about the fact that the series is premiering. I'm going, you gotta understand there's a big jump between the end of season 2 and what you're going to be seeing now, and recognize there's some different themes, but they will all be watching this show.
Yeah.
They love the show so much. I mean, they come to the door every day. Are we watching an episode today? Are we watching an episode today? And I'm like, well, you know, and we usually probably average about 3 episodes a week.
So if you have any problems with them doing the work?
Well, see, that's what I'm saying, is they'll come in and, are we watching an episode? And I'll say, well, we have to make sure that we did the other work so that we can get to the episode. And we call it quid pro quo in my class. You pay to play.
Right.
And I've had kids, I'll say, okay, we have this paragraph you have to write, turn it in tomorrow, and that's what will determine whether or not we can watch the episode.
Right.
Or we'll do a quiz on something they were supposed to read last night. Everybody passes the quiz, we get to watch the next episode. The first one that we had the quid pro quo on was, and I was prepared for this one, I know it's not Eric Kripke's favorite, was bugs. And I had them read the story The Birds by Daphne du Maurier, which is of course where Alfred Hitchcock got the idea, and Bugs has a lot of the same themes and a lot of visual allusions to the movie The Birds. So they came to class and I said, okay, how many people read the story? And less than half the class had read the story. And I said, well, then we have to read the story in class because that's what we need to cover. And I said, this is not a punishment. This is what we have to get done, but that means that we won't get to watch the episode.
Right.
You would have thought I shot their cat. I mean, it was these kids, but they couldn't be mad at me.
Right, because they had done it themselves.
Was and like I said, reading the story wasn't punishment. They weren't supposed to have done that anyway. The next time I said, okay, so the next episode, I need you to write this paragraph, and it's quid pro quo, then we get to the next episode. They were meeting each other at the door the next morning. Do you have your homework? Do you have your homework? Let me see. Let me see. That's not enough. She won't take that. Write more, 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 more. She's not going to take it. I had 100% of the kids turn in their homework. You talk to any 9th grade English teacher of a regular ed class, and that's not normal.
Right.
But that was the other part that killed me, was one day we did have a situation where 75% of them did their homework.
Okay.
And I was talking to another teacher and I said, so we had to put the episode off a little bit while we all worked on that episode, the assignment together, and then, but they still made it up. They were okay. And the teacher's going, but 75%, she's like, that's really good. That's almost, I mean, that's good enough. And I said, I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
No, it's not good enough. They're, you know, good enough is not your best.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and in the real world, sometimes your best is not good enough. But in my class, your best is the only thing that is good enough. And great for the 75 kids who did their homework, but I'm not leaving the other 6 behind.
Right.
And we went back and did it. And the thing is, they encourage each other. And come on, we can do this. And at first, too, it was really hard for me because I was like, well, great, I'm getting them to do the work, but still, they're only doing it because they want to watch the show. They're not making the connection between the two things. But the other day when I was teaching, we were playing a story on cassette tape and they were all listening. And one of the things that I teach them to do is read with a pen in their hand. And they're constantly highlighting and underlining and making notes in the margin, because I teach them to do that during episodes as well. So they have a whole graphic organizer and things that they do while they're watching. I call it active watching. And then you have active reading. So I look over and they're listening to this story. It's Marigolds by Eugenia Collier. It's from the book Breeders, which is a bunch of short stories. Really fabulous writer. And I looked over, and not only was every single kid sitting up and listening, every single one of them had a pen or a highlighter in their hand. And then I looked over and I nearly cried. One of my students, who at the beginning of the school year had had his head down, I couldn't get the kid to pay attention at all. Not only did he have a pen in his hand and he was highlighting and underlining, he was making notes in the margin. And I'm not talking about like I was writing the notes on the board and he was copying them down. This kid was spontaneously writing,
actively making
paraphrasing, summarizing notes in the margin. And I was like, you know what, tomorrow maybe this isn't working, but today I am king. This is awesome. And it was such an amazing moment as a teacher. And, you know, I mean, we all have these mountaintop moments occasionally teaching. I've been teaching for 12 years. Right. But they're few and far between. Right. To have, you know, I just listed 3 of them. I had 3 of them in the past 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You know, wow. And the kids get it. And like I said, one of them was talking about, and the new television series, this new television season hasn't even started yet. And I pity their parents when it does. Right. Several of the kids have been talking to me about how their parents have told them to shut up. Because when they're watching TV, these kids are going, ooh, that's rack focus. That means this. And that is high angle. That means this. Ooh, they want us to know that this person's bad. Right. And the parents are going, shh, we know, we're paying attention. But the thing is, these kids already knew that stuff. Right. But it only took 1 day of lesson, 1 day of lesson to talk about camera angles and lighting and diegetic and non-diegetic sound. I used a book, John Golden, who's a teacher in California, wrote a fabulous book called Reading in the Dark. And it's about using movies to influence reading comprehension. And he talks about teaching the kids all the different film angles and camera movements and all the different things, and how all of those different details mean something. Like I said, I did a 1 day lesson on that, and I used the pilot. I used clips from the pilot, because the pilot has pretty much, the only one that was hard to pull off in the pilot was Dutch angle, and I'm sure it was there. It was just I had some trouble finding a Dutch angle, which is one of those crazy angles. There's a whole lot of that in season 2, but not as much in the very pilot. But all the other, you know, I mean, your pans and your tilts and your high angle and your low angle and high key light, low key lighting. And of course, I mean, Supernatural, we've always got the half face, which is the bottom side lighting. They don't necessarily have a lot of the top back lighting, which is where they give you a halo. Right. But I was able to use posters from this past season where they were giving Dean his halo. Right. And so, you know, but the kids see it, and we'll be watching, and the kids will go, oh, look, he's conflicted because of the lighting. That's one of the things about Supernatural, is they use so much of that stuff because it's part of the horror genre. Right. But they shoot everything with such a movie kind of precision. One of the things that I think is really unique about Supernatural, and it was also the same case with a television show that I also think is excellent, though I don't know if I would be able to pull it off using it in a classroom because of some of the more adult issues. was a television show called Farscape. And this is another thing that I talk to my students about, and one of the ways that it really connects with them. This is what I call 21st century literacy. This is really looking at the whole picture of literature in terms of all the different communications.
Right.
It's a collaborative thing. It's not just the writers. It's not just the director. It's not just the actors. You have so many of these different elements where they're all working together to tell a story. And I think that's one of the critical things where you really can show how just a television show can transcend into the world of literature, is where you're looking at this collaborative process.